Hello, I'm Tim Francis. I'm an educational psychologist with 23 years experience. I have my own practice known as the Dyslexia Centre, which is in East London, and this is a presentation that I was asked to make by a postgraduate group which essentially consisted of university lecturers and heads of learning support as well as specialist teachers who were responsible for their university's learning support. In the United Kingdom, university students who have specific difficulties such as dyslexia or dyscalculia or other specific difficulties are entitled to claim a grant which is quite substantial. In 2017 it was approximately £1,800 a year, and it was non-repayable. The idea was this was to pay for the student support. So as dyscalculia is included within the specific difficulties which constitute a disability under English law, the 2010 Equality Act, this core group wished to hear more about dyscalculia and the process of diagnosis and assessment. So this talk was about the assessment and diagnosis of dyscalculia. Dyscalculia is a relatively new kid on the block. The first mention I can find is 1974 when Dr. Kosk presented dyscalculia as a specific difficulties. Now the interesting thing here is he separated it into six different categories. So right from the onset, no one was saying that it's just difficulties with adding and taking, dividing. It was a much broader specific difficulty. A little later, David Geary uses the term mathematical disabilities, which you will see a little later in this talk reappears in the American Diagnostic Manual, DSM-5, and he divided it into 3 groups rather than 6. But again, the important point is it's seen as a spread across number. And he also brought in a standardized test of mathematics number skill, which, as you will see later, continues to this day. Now, from the point of view of an educator, the fact that 5 to 8% of students are generally agreed to have specific difficulties within the number processing arena, dyscalculia, is of great interest. But of course, once you start getting students who have got already a diagnosed difficulty such as dyslexia, that ratio will be hugely increased. I would suggest probably around 25 to 30%. So 2001, the British government starts to recognise difficulties with number as a specific difficulty, and they offer a definition of dyscalculia, which we'll look at in a moment. 2011, the Specific Learning Difficulties Working Group, which is the group in the United Kingdom which advised on the assessment for the grant we talked about earlier on for university students with specific learning difficulties. The Specific Learning Difficulties Working Group essentially laid out a very thorough and comprehensive assessment and said how you should diagnose, and it gave a very detailed description of how dyscalculia should be diagnosed. 2013, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5 includes number within the diagnosis of specific learning disorder. DSM-5 is produced by the American Psychiatric Association, and it tends to be a worldwide recognized diagnostic guidance, if you want. So, as promised, here is the Department for Education and Science, the British government definition of dyscalculia. And in 2001 they said it's a condition that affects the ability to acquire arithmetical skills. In other words, that's quite broad, isn't it? Arithmetical skills are a kind of broad range, aren't they? Because they can include things like working out a timetable. You know, you're going to go from Mysore to Madras, you need to work out timings. It can also be things like working out percentages and adding up your restaurant bill. A difficulty with understanding simple number concepts. Things like adding, taking, dividing. Just having real difficulty with seeing patterns in the times table. 10 nines are 90. 8 eights are 80. That kind of simple number concepts. Just a poor intuitive grasp of number. Not sort of understanding, and you're in a discussion or a negotiation, so how much a mortgage is going to cost you. It's a £100,000 house, the mortgage rate is 5%. Understanding it's going to cost you a certain sum of money each year in interest. When you buy a drink at the bar, you give the person £10 note and understanding you're probably going to get £5 back. This is London prices 2017. Apologies from people in parts of the country where drinks are more expensive or cheaper even. Averagely, students with dyscalculia will have difficulties learning number facts and procedures. So the process of long division, times tables, these types of things will cause inordinate levels of difficulty. Despite lots of intervention, students will then seem to sort of forget things. What we see often, and you will see within the dyscalculia screen that my dyslexia centre has produced, is that students may get the right answer, but they will do so slowly and sort of mechanically, which is why when we established the criteria for the test and the standards, we were very careful to time the amount of time that the subjects that we standardised the test on, if you want, we measured the time very carefully, and then we added in a little extra element to be conservative. So our test, or any dyscalculia screen, hopefully you may get all the answers correct or enough to pass the screen, but you'll be outside the time frame. So when we bring it all together, we see that from the British government point of view, there are 5 criteria that make up dyscalculia. Going back to the 2011 Specific Learning Difficulties Working Group, the group that devised how educational psychologists should assess and diagnose dyscalculia in university students, the working group are saying that you should do a dyscalculia screen. A dyscalculia screen should include all the things that people say make up dyscalculia. And as we're seeing, there is a sort of there's differences of opinion in the sense of what's included in dyscalculia, but everybody agrees that it is a spread of difficulties. What we did with our dyscalculia screen, Dyscalc, is we looked at what everybody said and we included everything that everybody said. One of the things that they require is an IQ test, a test of cognitive ability. IQ tests do not test how clever you are. What IQ tests measure is they predict how well you should do at university, school, college. IQ tests do not test cleverness in the whole sense of the word, which cleverness includes knowing how colours go together, measuring and fitting building a chair or a table, you know, social skills, getting on with people, managing people. These are things that are not measured by IQ tests. IQ tests purely and absolutely measure and predict how well you should do at university or school. But this is a requirement, and then what you do is you compare the standardized test of numbers, so it's adding, taking, dividing, a test of that with the IQ, and if you've got access to a high quality testing equipment, as educational psychologists do, you'll be able to make statistical comparisons relatively easily. There should also be a history taken, and a history of difficulties with number, so go right back to the beginnings of primary school and work all the way through. And also you are required to observe test behaviour. Does the student appear tense, anxious, lacking in confidence, indecisive, that sort of thing. Returning to the DSM-5, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5, produced by the American Psychiatric Association, we can see that they are saying that there are 6 factors on which you should take into account when diagnosing specific learning disorder with mathematics. Number sense, which we talked about, just a sense of how much change you should get, how long it's going to take to get somewhere, that sort of thing. Number facts, you can see there's lots of crossover with other definitions. So knowledge about times table, remembering how to do a long division, that sort of thing. Calculation, which is adding, taking, dividing really for dyscalculia. It's not algebra and trigonometry. A recall of mathematical facts, things like say times tables and that sort of thing. In a sort of longer type calculation, getting lost and applying mathematical concepts, facts and procedures means things like, you know, knowing how to do a times table, how to apply that, say, in a practical setting. You know, you want 3 theatre tickets that are £9 each, for instance. So, bringing everything together, Dr. Kosk has 6 areas that made up dyscalculia. Geary, 3 areas. The British government, DFES, 5 areas. The Specific Learning Difficulties Working Group wants a multiple area screen, such as the Dyscalc screen, and DSM-5 has got 6 areas. So everybody's agreeing this is a multiple area specific learning difficulty. Okay. When this 2011 Specific Learning Difficulties Working Group produced their guidance on the diagnosis of dyscalculia, we noted that there were several commercial offerings. The absolute minimum was £5 each, and that was if you bought like 50 administrations. And we thought it seemed expensive, because after all, a screen is not a standardized test where you are putting the population, spreading the population across a normal distribution curve. What a step is saying, can you do it, can you not? It's as simple as that, actually. So what we did, we decided that we were going to produce our own screen. And not only that, we were going to put it into the public domain, and we're going to do all the research and all the statistics, and we were going to do it pro bono, free of charge, and we were going to make it available to the general public free of charge. So what we did our research, which is what I've described to you already, and we said all of these things should be included in a good dyscalculia screen. So number sense, we've already talked about intuitive feel for numbers, memorization and recall of facts that relate to arithmetic, calculation, adding, taking, dividing, reasoning, figure out number related information in real world settings, processing numerical information again in real world settings, understanding number in written numerical form. So for instance, when you get a mortgage statement or a mortgage offer, often that's a sort of mix of number and words, and in real life you need to understand number in that type of situation. Again, simple adding, taking, dividing, subtraction, multiplication, these basic number processing skills, they should be included in a screen. And that this basic number processing should be in pencil and paper form, obviously not using a calculator. And we need to solve real world problems presented in written form, for instance working out how much our mortgage is likely to cost on an annual basis, working out how much money we've got coming in, our salary coming in, can we afford this mortgage, can we afford this new car, that sort of real world problem. It should also include handling money and change, a very important part of daily life. And we also need to include a measurement of speed in our dyscalculia screener. And we need to think how this is affecting people in everyday life. So that was the domain of Dyscalc, our dyscalculia screen, which you can see quite freely on the internet and make use of as you wish in your business, your school, college, university, or just for yourself personally. The way we developed Dyscalc was we got a number of questions for each of the 12 areas, and we trialled them on students diagnosed with dyscalculia by an educational psychologist. In other words, we wanted to see if they got them wrong, and we wanted to get a bank of questions that the students diagnosed with dyscalculia got wrong. And then we had our bank, and we used social media. It was quite at the big, from old people like me, it was quite at the beginning of social media, and some of the young folk that we asked to help us had like 1,000 followers. I think they're called followers anyway, and they asked their people if they had good math skills and they'd kind of done averagely well at school or university to do our screener. Now don't forget, this trial screener was all questions that our dyscalculic students had got wrong. So we were looking to find the questions that the non-dyscalculic students got right from that bank. We ended up with 20 questions that dyscalculics got wrong, but non-dyscalculics got right. And we published that on the URL that you can see there. As I mentioned earlier, Dyscalculia is free to you. We pay for it through our practice. You get the results at the end of the screen, and we don't ask for personal information. It is absolutely anonymous and free to use. Okay. If you are an educator trying to get your students to take screeners and complete pre-assessment forms, this next section may be of interest to you. What we found was that our students were incredibly busy. We also found that the days of students having Word or Microsoft Word was kind of over, and we found that we were sending out pre-assessment forms in Word and we were getting garbled nonsense back as they opened them up on their various apps and whatever. So we developed a pre-assessment online form which was online, and what we then did was we included a link to Dyscalc within the pre-assessment form. I tell you this because what you could do if you're wanting your university students to, or your school students, because Dyscalc really goes up from, we say 14, but you can go a little bit lower. You could certainly go for 12, 13. So if you wanted a student to complete Dyscalc, you can email them the link and then they can do it on their mobile phone. There is the link, and you can see you just simply click on it and they can complete it on their phone or their tablet or their computer even. Okay, and there's our pre-assessment form that you can complete anywhere, and it really worked well. Students like it. What we found with an online pre-assessment form is near 100% completion. We massively reduced did not attends, and also we kind of got notice that the student might not attend, and were able to prompt them or to speak to them on the phone and get them to cancel if they wanted to cancel. When students did complete Dyscalc, we found that approximately 90% who were dyscalculic completed it, and the remaining 10% who didn't complete it, often because there's no number on their course, say they're doing art and design or something, but then you have a discussion with them obviously and say, well, I mean, it's got implications for time management and all sorts of other things, and then the remaining 10% you sort of pick up like that. I would suggest all students who are selected for DSA, Disabled Students Allowance in the UK, that's 18 plus, are assessment for dyscalculia, and I would suggest any student over 12 years of age is screened with an appropriate dyscalculia screener such as Dyscalc. I would suggest that any student over 8 years of age is assessed with a screener. There are plenty of screeners for children sort of between 8 and 12, which you may have to pay for, but some of which are free. Just recurring to why you explain to students why they should look into dyscalculia even though they haven't got maths on their course. Things like driving, speed and distance, just for their own self-esteem, knowing that it's not just not very good at maths, it's actually something going on. Understanding that you might be late and you might lose a job, and understanding you might need to adjust your behaviour to ensure you're extra early for things. You can lose social opportunities because you're late for appointments with your friends. Perhaps explaining to your friends that you might need a little bit of help with that. It allows access arrangements such as extra time to be given because a student might have difficulties with time management in exams. You might make better employment choices, in other words avoid jobs that require mathematical type processing, and as mentioned earlier, a diagnosis allows access arrangements to be suggested by the assessing psychologist. At this point I ask questions, but as we're on the internet I can't have that, but you'll feel free to email me if you wish. Let's go to our website www.educational-psychologist.co.uk, and we have a facility there to ask advice through the internet, which is all free of charge. Thank you for listening.